The Galactic Senate chamber was immense, a cathedral of light and glass suspended above a swirling gas giant. Delegates of countless species murmured across their floating platforms, colors and shapes alien and magnificent, voices layered like an orchestra of discordant instruments. Protocols were recited, motions passed, but the air vibrated with tension, an invisible current that hummed louder than any translator could convey. And then the doors opened. I stepped inside alone, human, unarmed, unannounced. My boots echoed against the polished floor as the chamber's gravity adjusted to accommodate the sudden presence of one species that refused expectation. Eyes turned in disbelief. Whispers carried across light minutes in translation. A human had entered without permission. A human, without a seat, without a title, without recognition, was in the center of the galaxy's political stage. The Emperor's dais floated above the floor, a monument of glass and metal, its occupant draped in ceremonial robes of gold and sapphire. He regarded me with a calm disdain of someone accustomed to unquestioned power. Advisors leaned in, whispering, gesturing at the human before them. Cameras and data streams tried to focus, but reality resisted compression. I was not a symbol. I was a variable they could not calculate. The floor trembled slightly as I advanced, each step deliberate. Protocol dictated distance, silence, and deference. I chose none. The assembly fell silent. Only the hum of life support systems filled the void. I could see the smallest facial movements, the twitch of an antenna, the flare of iridescent skin, the subtle contraction of ocular muscles, all registering recognition, shock, fear. A single human heart beating in a chamber that had never accommodated such certainty. I spoke, and the sound traveled further than any translator could carry. My words were simple, direct, not diplomatic, not rhetorical. The galaxy's emperor is a tyrant. And today, accountability begins. Gasps swept the platforms like a contagion. Delegates tried to interrupt. Security forces shifted in their bindings, prepared to respond. The Emperor rose, robe trailing, eyes narrowing. His voice cut across the chamber, authoritative and rehearsed. Who dares speak to me without sanction? I paused, letting the silence stretch, a counterweight to his command. I do. I am human. We are unbound by your ceremony, unshackled by your fear. You have ruled while countless died. Today, your reign ends, not with war, but with truth. There was movement, subtle at first, then sudden. Guards drew energy blades, shields flared, and yet every motion was slower than mine, as if time itself hesitated. I advanced, eyes locked on the Emperor. Calculations of threat, probability, and consequence cascaded across my mind in cold logic, but action did not wait for thought. Action is human. Action is decisive. I leapt. The distance between us closed in a heartbeat. No projectile, no weapon, only motion and the intent carried within it. The Emperor tried to step back, a reflex, but even his reflexes were bound by centuries of expectation. The ceremonial blade at his side was a flourish, not a defense. Hands connected. The ceremonial collar slipped from its place, a symbol of supremacy and dominion, and fell. The Emperor's head followed in a clean, unanticipated arc. Silence ripped through the chamber, more absolute than the vacuum of space outside. Cameras froze. Delegates froze. Even the holographic displays registered a delay. A human had done what the galaxy had told itself was impossible. I stood over the fallen symbol, breathing steady, heartbeat audible only to myself. Justice, I said, does not require sanction. Only action. Voices erupted, a cacophony of shock, disbelief, and fear. Species that had never spoken to one another now shouted across platforms. Some tried to flee. Others raised weapons. But the momentum had shifted. One variable, one human, had rewritten expectation. Security tried again. I moved between them and the platform, deflecting, sidestepping, each motion measured. Their energy pulses struck air where I had just been. I could see the calculations on their HUD scrambling, recalibrating, attempting to solve for an outcome no algorithm could predict. From the upper galleries, envoys transmitted what had happened to every sector. Every eye, every mind, every observer understood at once. Humanity did not negotiate. Humanity did not bow. Humanity acted. I looked down at the fallen emperor, at the weight of centuries in his robes, and then back at the assembly, thousands of beings waiting, uncertain. One choice had changed everything. One human had walked into the seat of power and demanded consequence. And this was only the beginning. The chamber erupted, though not with the sound of applause. The delegates' voices collided, overlapping in a chaotic symphony of fear, anger, and disbelief. Holographic screens flickered with translations as some species attempted to restore order, but the magnitude of what had happened could not be contained by protocol. Security teams hesitated, unsure whether to engage or retreat. A human had violated every assumption, every calculation, and the effect rippled outward like gravity itself had shifted. I moved deliberately, hands raised, not in submission but to assert control over what had to be controlled. The narrative. Words were weapons, and I wielded them now. Your institutions, I said, voice steady, carrying over the hum of panicked translators, were built to protect you. Yet you allowed tyranny to fester unchecked. Today, that ends. The galaxy will see that accountability does not require permission. Some tried to interject, their translations garbled, their syntax collapsing under urgency. They did not understand that the human method is not negotiation, it is execution of principle. I watched their movements, the twitch of limbs, the widening of eyes, the subtle retraction of defense protocols. Every organism in the chamber registered the singular anomaly before them, a being who operated outside the rules, yet within reason. Delegates scrambled toward emergency controls, attempting to seal platforms, retract energy bridges, summon enforcers. I anticipated, sidestepped, and moved forward. Each step was measured. Each motion carried the silent communication of one who had trained in chaos and thrived in it. My presence alone redefined the parameters of what was possible within that space. For centuries, the Senate had operated under the assumption that decorum was inviolable. I had rendered that assumption obsolete. From the upper galleries, emissaries transmitted encrypted reports, sending real-time footage to command centers, media arrays, and observation stations across light years. Panic spread as the message became clear. Humanity does not ask. Humanity acts. The ripple of fear was instantaneous, immediate, and precise. Entire fleets halted maneuvers mid-orbit as captains recalculated the probability of engagement with a species that ignored precedent. Even without a word, the effect of one human walking into the heart of power shattered centuries of protocol. The Emperor's aides attempted intervention. One advanced with ceremonial authority, a staff of command glowing with inertial energy. He hesitated at the edge of the dais, perhaps uncertain whether the human could be reasoned with or whether I would end him next. I did not hesitate. A simple motion, a controlled shove, and his trajectory corrected itself to the floor, unharmed but thoroughly demoralized. The hierarchy was exposed, the illusion of invulnerability stripped away. The Senate had underestimated the simplest truth about humanity. Resolve does not require hierarchy. Whispers grew into shouted accusations. Translations streamed across the chamber. Treason, sacrilege, violence against the sovereign. Yet no coordinated action emerged. One cannot coordinate against unpredictability. By the time security teams attempted to converge, I had moved again, standing in the center of the assembly, projecting confidence that was almost palpable. Humans do not cower. Humans do not falter. Humans do not negotiate when the stakes are moral clarity itself. I turn my gaze across the delegates, measuring reactions. Some species recoiled, their appendages curling defensively, others froze, faces betraying sudden comprehension. They had all studied human history, imagined its patterns, but none had ever truly considered its capacity for sudden, singular decisiveness. This was the unquantifiable variable the galaxy could not model. One human alone had rewritten the rules. From a control panel, I activated the chamber's central communication grid. Every sector, every council, every observation post received a direct feed. There would be no ambiguity. The Emperor had fallen. The Senate had been exposed. The galaxy would now witness accountability enacted, unmediated, uncompromising. The message was clear. Power is not a right. It is a responsibility enforced by those willing to act. And as the echoes of disbelief cascaded through the chamber, I realized the deeper truth. The Emperor's head was merely the beginning.
Symbols die.
Structures crumble. But one human walking into the heart of tyranny had awakened something far more dangerous. The understanding that action, when unrestrained by fear or tradition, defines history itself. The delegates would speak for decades of this day. They would argue, deny, and rationalize. But every one of them would remember a single, undeniable fact. Humanity had entered the Galactic Senate and claimed its authority not with bureaucracy, but with courage, and the galaxy could not unsee it. The aftermath was immediate, chaotic, and inescapable. Word of the Emperor's fall, though not broadcast by the Senate itself, spread through encrypted channels, private feeds, and clandestine couriers faster than any official announcement could. Entire systems stopped. Fleets held in orbit, debating whether to intervene or retreat. Merchants and diplomats froze mid-transmission. The galaxy had spent millennia believing in stability, in ceremony, in the infallibility of hierarchy. That illusion had shattered, and the resonance echoed louder than any cannon. I remained in the chamber, unyielding, as aides scrambled to restore order and security forces attempted to reassert control. The Emperor's body, now a symbol rather than a man, was removed by the few who still believed that appearance mattered more than consequence. I did not watch. I did not flinch. I was not here to witness death. I was here to enforce the truth of accountability. One human walking into the seat of power had proven that institutions could not safeguard tyranny. Delegates whispered, some pleading for clemency, others demanding immediate action. Security officers reconfigured energy barriers, trying to isolate the anomaly that was me. But human presence is not bound by expectation. It is a vector of will. I stepped past barriers, through personnel, ignoring the murmurs and the shouts. My objective was not to intimidate. It was to clarify, to establish certainty in the galaxy's most uncertain hour. From the high galleries, information arrived that confirmed what I had long suspected. The Emperor had ruled through fear, manipulation, and procedural inertia. Systems had collapsed under his edicts, populations had suffered, and no Senate vote, no law, no ceremonial reprimand had ever stopped him. This was the principle behind my act. Where law failed, action must follow. Accountability does not require permission, only execution. Outside the chamber, fleets began maneuvering. Loyalists loyal only to hierarchy attempted to project power. Warships moved into transit lanes, threatening blockade, demanding submission. I anticipated their actions, tracing command signatures, projecting force in every vector without touching a weapon. Humanity does not bluff. Humanity does not negotiate coercion. It acts with inevitability once the threshold of injustice has been crossed. A single strike was ordered, not kinetic, not violent, but precise. Communication feeds transmitted proof of prior abuses, secret protocols, hidden edicts, all exposed to the galaxy in real time. Propaganda dissolved into reality. Fleets halted mid-maneuver. Commanders hesitated. The realization spread that the Emperor's authority had been symbolic, enforced by belief, and now belief was broken. Delegates attempted to convene an emergency vote, to restore governance, to reassert ritual. I observed, knowing ritual cannot contain action once the precedent has been established. One human, acting decisively, had rewritten the rules. To argue against it was meaningless. The debate was not about law. It was about whether fear could enforce obedience, and the answer had already been rendered. Some tried to flee the chamber, platforms retracting, escape pods cycling into operation. I did not stop them. Flight is instinctive. Observation is inevitable. History would remember them as witnesses, even if they were absent from consequence. A single human had entered a space considered inviolable, and the memory of that presence alone would alter every decision made thereafter. Then came the transmission from Earth. It was brief, direct, and unmistakable. Humanity enforces accountability where law fails. All sectors will recognize authority as action. Exceptions will be corrected. The message did not ask for compliance. It did not appeal to morality. It imposed understanding. The galaxy could interpret it as threat or principle. Either way, the precedent was established, and it could not be undone. I returned to the central dais, standing over the Emperor's ceremonial place. Silence fell across the chamber like a tangible weight. Delegates lowered eyes, appendages, tentacles, and signals. No one dared challenge the narrative in my presence. They understood, viscerally, that humanity had entered the heart of power and emerged unscathed, uncompromised, and unrepentant. From the observation decks above, I could see the first signs of ripple effects: fleets retracting, alliances reconsidering, emissaries sending urgent inquiries. Humanity's name, once a footnote in galactic diplomacy, was now a standard against which action would be measured. The galaxy had learned the cost of ignoring the variable that could not be predicted, the human who does not negotiate, who does not defer, who acts. And in that quiet, I realized that the act was no longer about a single emperor. It was about all power, all deception, all unaccountable authority. One human had demonstrated that the line between symbol and action is absolute, and that crossing it can change everything. The chamber, once a place of ritual and control, had become a proving ground. And the galaxy, watching, had just learned that it had underestimated the measure of humanity. The repercussions unfolded faster than any delegate could comprehend. Within hours, sector governors sent encrypted messages, fleets realigned, and trade corridors, once casual and predictable, now carried a new layer of caution. Across systems, analysts recalculated the probability of human intervention, and every simulation ended the same way. The anomaly could not be contained. Humanity had become a vector of certainty in a galaxy built on expectation and negotiation. I remained in the Senate chamber, not as a prisoner, not as a victor, but as a fulcrum. Every movement I made, every glance, every deliberate breath conveyed one immutable truth: humans act when others will not. Protocols were irrelevant. Ceremonies were meaningless. Even fleets that outnumbered us could not predict the precise moment of intervention, because human action is not linear, and it does not wait for permission. Delegates began to approach cautiously, some with conciliatory gestures, others with defensive postures. They spoke in languages and dialects layered with subtle nuance, attempting to negotiate, to assert, to influence. I heard every translation, noted every hesitation. Words carried weight, but only action cemented authority. That was the lesson I had delivered with the Emperor's fall, and now it applied to the entire Senate. An emergency council convened above the main chamber, representatives of the most powerful sectors. They debated whether to sanction me, to demand extradition, or to impose economic and military penalties. None dared act. Each calculation returned the same uncomfortable truth: enforcing consequence against a human who had already redefined precedent was riskier than compliance. History would remember hesitation, and the memory of one human in motion was now a standard of accountability. Outside the chamber, the first human-led enforcement squads began patrolling known corridors of influence. They carried no weapons openly, they needed none. Presence was sufficient. Delegates who had once ignored legislation or circumvented treaties now received direct notifications of human oversight. Compliance was no longer optional because the cost of testing the new boundaries had been demonstrated beyond argument. I watched an envoy from a minor sector step forward, trembling, requesting audience. He spoke rapidly, his appendages quivering in every direction, delivering promises, assurances, and obligations with equal fervor. I listened, then responded simply. Accountability is not negotiable. Observation ensures clarity. Do not test what you do not intend to understand. He nodded, too terrified to speak further, and retreated. In the galleries, holographic monitors displayed reaction feeds from distant systems. Across light years, commanders, politicians, and civilians alike registered the event, and the consensus was immediate. The human variable could not be ignored. Even those who had once dismissed Earth's influence were now forced to reckon with it. Calculations, strategies, and doctrines collapsed in real time, reshaped by the stark truth that action, unmediated by ceremony, defines authority. An unexpected transmission arrived from a coalition that had opposed the Emperor's reign. They claimed neutrality, offered treaties, and pledged cooperation. I intercepted their message, reading the subtle threat beneath every polite phrase. It was clear, they sought to exploit hesitation. I sent a reply visible to every observer in the chamber. Neutrality will be respected only where human intervention is unnecessary. Any attempt to manipulate events will be corrected. The ripple effect spread to private fleets, mercenary groups, and rogue states. Orders came down through communication networks. Do not interfere. Do not test. Compliance was enforced not by intimidation alone, but by the demonstrated certainty of human action. The galaxy had learned that when humanity chooses, consequences follow instantly and without negotiation. Even as I stood over the empty dais, contemplating the echoes of the Emperor's fall, I sensed the next phase approaching. The quiet of compliance is fragile, and observers in shadowed sectors began measuring, calculating, preparing. They would test the limits. They would search for gaps. And I understood what was coming. The real challenge was not removing a tyrant or correcting protocol. It was maintaining the clarity of action when every corner of the galaxy was watching, waiting, and planning to push against the standard I had set. Humanity had entered the Senate, reshaped expectation, and now the galaxy would probe, relentlessly, for the moment when hesitation might return. The corridors of power had changed forever. The question lingering in every observer's mind was the same. How far would humanity go next? And I knew the answer would be brutal, decisive, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever calculated. The calm after the upheaval was deceptive. Delegates returned to their platforms, fleets to their orbits, and emissaries to their screens. But beneath the surface, every system simmered with calculation. Humanity had demonstrated the impossible. One individual, unarmed, had toppled a centuries-old emperor, and the galaxy now understood the weight of unpredictability. And unpredictability, once revealed, becomes a force others cannot ignore. I remained in the Senate chamber, the apex of observation and judgment. Holographic feeds scrolled with updates from across sectors, fleets adjusting their patrols, political factions rewriting policy, clandestine alliances forming and dissolving at the speed of fear. Everywhere, the message was the same. Humans do not negotiate, they act. Action is precedent. Consequence is immediate. Hesitation is dangerous. An envoy arrived from the Outer Rim, one of the sectors least exposed to human influence. Their representative floated onto the platform, appendages quivering, data pads scanning rapidly. "We request an audience with the Senate," it said, voice strained through layers of translation. "We seek clarification. Authority must be defined. Intervention cannot be arbitrary." I watched silently. The assembly had already been redefined. Authority no longer depended on legislation, vote, or ceremony. Authority existed in action. I allowed the envoy to finish, then spoke. Authority is not given. It is enacted. Observation is not optional. Action is not negotiable. Humanity enforces consequences where others fail. The envoy recoiled slightly. It was clear that their mind had no reference for the weight of the statement. They were not afraid of me. They were afraid of what humanity had revealed, that one species could act decisively, without sanction, without delay, and that the results were absolute. Their fleet, their councils, their sectors, all were now under a new constant. They would be observed, and intervention would follow any breach. From the upper galleries, data arrived showing distant fleets halting maneuvers mid-orbit, recalculating trajectories. rethinking engagements. Traders canceled contracts. Mercenary groups disbanded operations. Even rogue enclaves paused, unwilling to risk the unpredictable consequences of interference. Fear had become an infrastructure, a new protocol written in real time across hundreds of systems. The Senate itself attempted to assert control. Security officers deployed defensive measures, isolation fields, and barriers. It was theater. One human presence, in motion and resolute, had redefined the boundaries of power. Protocols were irrelevant. Regulations meaningless. The chamber's architecture, designed to enforce hierarchy, now functioned only as observation platforms. The galaxy had witnessed action unmediated by ritual, and every calculation now included the possibility of a human intervention that could not be anticipated. I stepped forward, glancing at the empty seat where the Emperor had once presided. Symbols die, institutions crumble, but the precedent remains. Every delegate understood it, even if they did not articulate it. Humanity had shown the fundamental truth of power. Accountability, when enforced by action rather than procedure, leaves no room for evasion. From the edge of the system, shadowed observers emerged, fleets that had waited, watching, measuring, calculating whether humanity's standard could be challenged. They hovered beyond engagement range, silent, patient, and lethal. This was the test I had anticipated. The galaxy had learned the cost of underestimating humanity, but some would still probe, still test, still seek the moment where hesitation might return. I addressed the chamber, voice calm, resonant, carrying across the suspended platforms. The galaxy has seen what happens when law fails. One human has demonstrated that action defines consequence. Any challenge, any attempt to subvert accountability, will meet the same certainty. Observe, learn, and measure. Humanity will act where it must. And as the last echoes of my words faded into the suspended silence, the distant observers shifted. Calculations flickered in their systems. Decisions formed. Alliances realigned. Somewhere beyond the stars, fleets prepared to test the boundaries we had established. I stood over the vacant dais, the weight of centuries and expectation pressing down, and knew the inevitable. This was only the beginning. The galaxy had seen what one human could do, and now, unseen forces were aligning, waiting for the precise moment to see if the line would hold. And when they came, humanity would be ready. Not with hesitation, not with diplomacy, but with action. The chamber lights dimmed. The platforms fell silent. Outside, fleets in shadow adjusted their formations, preparing to probe, to challenge, to test. And I smiled, knowing the galaxy had yet to comprehend the storm it had awakened.